A similar question has been asked. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Zakir Naik. My name is Abdul Ganiyu. I would like to know the ruling on masturbation. I traveled and left my family behind for greener pasture for about 1.5 years now. I miss my wife very much. When I call her online for video chat, we sometimes end up with masturbation. I would like to know if this is sinful or not. A similar question is asked by third questioner. Assalamu alaikum, sir. I am Habibullah Islam from Assam, India. I am a student. Is masturbation haram in Islam? I do this and later I regret. I do tawbah, but after some days I do it again. I can't find the solution to this problem. I am unhappy with masturbation and what I do. The question that is masturbation permitted in Islam is a very common question. And literally every session I have 1 or 2 people asking this question. But I've been trying to avoid answering this question, but today I decided that let me answer this question. As far as the act of masturbation is concerned, the scholars in Islam, there are different opinions. But the majority of the scholars, they say that masturbation in Islam is haram. Even though majority of the scholars say haram, there's a large number which also say that it is makruh. And there's another large number of scholars who say that it is mubah, it's optional. So I would like to say at the outset that majority of the scholars, in terms of percentage, majority, they say that it is haram. But a large number, there may not be majority, but the number is huge. A large number of scholars, they also say it is makruh, it is discouraged. And another large number, though not in majority, they also say that it is mubah. And we'll discuss this issue today, and I'll let you know that which group of scholars do I agree with towards the end. As far as the jurist, the fuqaha, amongst the Shafi'i and the Maliki, almost all of them, they say that masturbation is haram. And according to Imam Ash-Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy on him, he says it is haram, and he quotes the verse of the Quran from Surah Al-Mu'minun, chapter number 23, verse number 5, 6 and 7. If you read Surah Al-Mu'minun, chapter number 23, verse number 1 onward, it says that believers will eventually be successful. Verse number 2 says, those who humble themselves in prayers. Verse number 3 says, those who avoid vain talks. Verse number 4 says that those who do acts and deeds of charity. Verse number 5 says, those who guard their private parts, or those who abstain from sex. Verse number 6 says, except those who they have married, that is their spouses, that is their wives, and those which their right hand possesses. For them, there is an exception. And verse number 7 says that all those who cross these limits, they are transgressors. So here the Quran says in Surah Al-Mu'minun, chapter number 23, verse number 5, 6 and 7, that the mu'mins are those who guard their private parts, abstain from illicit sex, except from their spouses and what their right hand possesses. That's an exception. And all those who cross these limits, they are transgressors. So based on this verse of the Quran, Imam Shafi'i, may Allah be pleased with him, he says that here the verse is very clear cut, that sex you can only have with your spouse and what your right hand possesses, and everything else is prohibited. Now, this verse of the glorious Quran can be interpreted in 2 ways. The first group of scholars, they understand this verse as here guarding your private parts. In Arabic, it means that all types of sexual pleasure. That means all types of sexual pleasures for a moment is only permitted with your wife and what your right hand possesses, that is the slave girl. And now, this slave woman has been abolished. So now it is restricted to only your wives. So based on this verse, if all sexual pleasure is only permitted with your wife, then even masturbation is haram. Masturbation is stimulation of your organ, and most of the time it is self-stimulation of your private part, such that there is ejaculation or there is orgasm. But the other group of scholars say that this verse, guard your private parts, it's only restricted to sexual intercourse. So the verse of the Quran actually means that you can have sexual intercourse only with your wife and what your right hand possesses. Other than sexual intercourse, this verse doesn't refer to other things. So if you agree with the second group of scholars, then masturbation doesn't fall under this verse of the Quran. That's the reason the scholars are divided. But if you literally know the verse of the Quran, the meaning, it says, guard your private parts. So, but naturally, there is no explicit verse in the Quran which says that masturbation is prohibited. And what we realize from this verse, it means sexual intercourse. And there are various other verses which have prohibited sexual intercourse with people outside the marital bonds, or if they are not what your right hand possesses, if they are not your slave woman. As Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Isra, chapter number 17, verse number 32, come not close to adultery, zina, or fornication, for it is an evil opening other routes to evil. So based on this verse of the Quran, the other group of scholars, they say that this verse specifically refers to sexual intercourse. That means sexual intercourse is only permitted with your wife and with what your right hand possesses. Otherwise, it doesn't mean other things. So if you agree the meaning of this verse is only restricted to sexual intercourse, then masturbation is not included in this verse. So that is the reason scholars differ. And according to Ibn Hazm, he says that our beloved Prophet has permitted a person to touch his private part. And there are hadith, it says touch with your left hand, no problem. It is your organ, you can touch. He also says that it is your fluid, you can emit it if you want. So based on that, he says when the Prophet has permitted to touch your private organ, and that is what you do in masturbation, it is self-stimulation, so surely it is permitted. And masturbation is of two types. One is self-stimulation. The other type of masturbation is your spouse or your sexual partner is stimulating you. And no scholar ever says that your wife or your spouse is not permitted to touch your private part. So based on this, surely the other type of masturbation where your spouse touches is permitted. So when you can enjoy with your spouse touching your private part, then why can't you do it yourself? So based on this, the second group of scholars, which is lesser in number, they say that this verse does not include masturbation at all. It is just talking about sexual intercourse. So sexual intercourse is only permitted with your wife, with your spouse, and with what your right hand possesses. It doesn't include masturbation. So that's how the scholars differ. There is another argument given by the first group of scholars who say that masturbation is prohibited, and they quote the hadith of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, which is mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, volume number 7, hadith number 5066, in which our beloved Prophet ﷺ said that, O young people, whoever has the means to get married, they should get married. For it will help you to lower your gaze and guard your modesty, guard your private parts. And it continues, those who cannot marry, they should fast, for it will reduce your sexual desire. So here, the first group of scholars, they say, here the Prophet said, if you cannot marry, you should fast. The Prophet did not say masturbation. That's the reason masturbation is haram. Now this logic, to say that just because the Prophet did not say masturbate, doesn't make masturbation haram. Yes, what we have to understand from this hadith, that the young people should marry if they can. If they cannot marry, they should fast. That means fasting is mustahab. Nowhere does it mean that masturbation is haram, because it's not mentioned as haram. Suppose if I say that eat date, it's good for nourishment and for energy. And if the Prophet says eat date, that does not mean eating mango is haram. It means eating date is good, it's mustahab. The other fruits become mubah. So it is wrong to conclude from this hadith of Sahih Bukhari that masturbation